Hello, my name is Marc Zablatsky, and I'm from AI Squared. Many of you may have heard of ZoomText. ZoomText is one of the products we make. We also make WindowEyes, as well as ZoomText Mag Reader, screen reader, a new product called Fusion, which builds a screen reader right into ZoomText. So we are an accessibility company that makes accommodations for individuals primarily with low vision and individuals that are blind so that they can go back to work and to use a computer. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of a new product called SiteQues, which basically builds accessibility features like zoom, speech, magnification, automatic panning and tracking and highlighting right into any website. So instead of an individual accommodation for one person at a time, our focus is working with corporations and organizations and nonprofits to make their digital content more accessible by building the features right into the digital content. What I'm going to talk to you about today is how can we make online recruiting, an online application process, and the learning management system and the whole process that it takes to get someone into a corporation, then successful at a corporation, making their life easier through making the digital content more accessible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and take a look at the statistics around employment, disability employment, as well as assistive technology usage. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some marketing research on how we can make assistive technology more impactful in the communities that they could serve. And then I'm going to talk about changing the AT paradigm, the assistive technology paradigm, from helping one individual at a time to helping hundreds of thousands, even millions of people at a time through universal accessibility. And I'll talk a little bit about our product, but not all that much. I'm not here to sell my product. I'm really here to talk about how we can change the way assistive technology is delivered to the masses. So I start out with this. I go, how effective is your recruiting and training process if an individual goes to your website and this is what they see? How are they actually going to do an application? How are they going to basically research your company if they can't even use your website? The reality is that 9% of people in the US have low vision. That's a lot of people, and this is basically what they see or worse when they come to your website. The problem is basically websites are designed by 20-something individuals that have very little empathy for people that actually have disabilities and have problems when they go to the website. So this is one of my developers developed this product. It's called No Coffee. It's one freebie. I'm going to have a few freebies here for people that they can bring back to their offices afterwards. So you can go and get a Chrome extension that is a visual simulator which will actually show what a website would look like with different types of visual issues. So you can literally look at, and actually I think someone that was here before had Stargars or ghosting, and you could literally see what they would see when they go to a website. So there's hundreds and even thousands of engineers that are now using this just as an empathy tool, and so this is the first freebie. We'll actually have a few gifts along the way because I think it's important that we build awareness back at our companies and organizations when we go back. And so I was just at a conference actually 2 days ago where the head of Easter Seals talked about the problems today with disability employment. 3 times, if you have a disability, you're 3 times more likely not to work. Okay? But the number that most people see is the unemployment rate, which basically says 10.7% of people with disabilities are unemployed, which is basically not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is 68% of the people that have disabilities are unemployed. So we've got a problem. Something that we're currently doing when it comes to onboarding and the application process and getting people to work inside the organization just isn't working. Pete, which is an amazing organization that researches They do a lot of research around employment practices and employment throughout the whole country, and they found that 46% of people with disabilities basically said that their online process was basically impossible. Okay, so we've got things going on with the government. Section 503, we're trying to get to 7% employment of individuals with disabilities with inside companies, but how can that happen when half the people that go to the website say it's impossible for them actually to do the process? So I don't know, are there any HR professionals in this room? I was told there would be. So I mean, am I telling you something that you don't know, or is this kind of pretty much what you expect? Okay, so I don't want to harp on it too much, but there's definitely a disconnect between what people are saying and what the reality of the situation is. And so we weren't happy just accepting some employment statistics, and we actually think there's an opportunity for assistive technology that goes beyond individuals with disabilities. So we commissioned our own study around older web users, people 50 and older, and what they experience when they are online. So this is not a disability study, but what we found that only 9% claim that they don't have challenges, but 25% of people 50 and over face challenges essentially every time they go to a website. So website usability is not just a disability issue. And if we can, at our companies, change the conversation from accessibility and compliance to how can we make our website more usable, then maybe we have a chance to get more individuals with disabilities working in corporations. And so the study that we did actually found that boomers versus seniors basically experienced the same challenges. It wasn't that all of a sudden when they got to 65, their challenges increased. The reality is they were roughly the same. So this was a surprise to us. What do they experience difficulties in? Page layout, page navigation, text and reading. So basically, everything. I mean, basically, you're hearing people say that 56% had problems with page layout, 39% with page navigation. You know, isn't that what a website is? So people are experiencing challenges, but they're not complaining. They're just not being heard. They also have difficulty filling out forms, following links, all the things that you would expect that people with disabilities have problems with. Older web users have the exact same issues. And so there's a real opportunity if we approach this together. They've been talking for years about the intersection between individuals with disabilities and seniors, because the majority, over half of individuals that are seniors have one type of disability or another, but they would never tell anyone they have a disability. They just have problems. They just use a magnifying glass, or they look closer to the screen, or they make the screen bigger, but they would never tell anyone that they have a disability. And so basically, we also ask the question, when you experience a problem on a website, what do you do? Well, guess what? Half of them said they go to a different website. So here's an opportunity where you can talk to your corporation and say, do you know that there's X number of people, okay, roughly 100 million Americans that have different types of print challenges that are having problems on your websites, and if you were more accessible, you could actually get more business. And so basically, 62% said they use it less, while half said they basically just use a different website. And so people that are 50 and over have a variety of issues, okay? But this isn't about people with disabilities, okay? So it turned out that 19% of the people that came and filled out this survey actually did say they had a disability. They actually didn't tell us on the first time we asked them the question. They didn't tell them on the second time. But when we kept asking them questions, I think we had about 3 or 4% say they had a disability the first time we asked. But by the end of the survey, we were able to calculate that roughly 19% of them had a disability. But you can see that 35% of the people said they had eye fatigue issues, or they had visual challenges. They didn't consider themselves to have a disability, but they had problems. So there's a lot of people that are not being met their needs with the current way assistive technology is distributed. So again, you can get this infographic going here. So there's another great organization. They're called the Nielsen-Norman Group. They did a study on older web users, and not to anyone's surprise, found that they're 43% slower doing the same thing online, and they make 2 times more errors doing the same task as younger web users. Okay, no big deal. But they did the analysis that if the usability for 50 and over web users was the same as young working age adults, they'd get 35% more activity on their website if they just made the usability as simple for the older adults as it is for the younger adults. Now, I'm not telling you to run out and redesign your website. I'm saying there are ways that we can make websites more usable for older and for individuals with disabilities without the need for a redesign of the website. And so basically, the evidence is pretty straightforward. Websites are not friendly to 50 plus. They have challenges, they face usability issues, it's slower, twice as many errors, just like I said. But the implications are quite significant. And they can get more activity by making some changes. So what we're talking about is, can we take the concept of assistive technology and apply it on a universal scale? And so for the HR people in the room, I meet with HR people all the time, and they always say, nobody's asking for an accommodation. Well, guess what? That doesn't let you off the hook, because the reality is they can't ask for an accommodation because they don't know that you're giving an accommodation. They can't read the fine print that says, go here to get it. And so you can't let yourself off the hook and say, we don't need to make our application process more accessible just because no one's asking for assistance. With 49% of the people saying that they basically, the web is unusable, how are they actually going to ask you for an accommodation? Okay, one of the next things that I want to talk about is web compliance. Okay, so everybody, I think, who here has heard of WCAG 2.0? Okay, pretty much everyone. Okay, it's critical for making websites accessible for someone that uses a screen reader. Okay, without standards and compliance, okay, you couldn't use a website if you were blind. But the problem is there's 20 times as many people that have visual issues that aren't blind, that don't own an assistive technology, so they can't benefit from the compliance work that's done. So the compliance work is mission critical to get things going, but it's not an excuse that that's all it is. And we hear a lot of corporations saying, well, I'm 508 compliant, or well, I'm following WCAG standards. The reality is you're only reaching a small number of people, a critical number of people, but you're not done just because you're compliant. So compliance doesn't equal accessibility, because there's 20 times as many people that need assistive technology that don't own it, okay? And it definitely doesn't equal usability. So we support, at AI Square, we support compliant markup. We actually help companies make their websites more compliant, but we don't talk about that being the end of the process. We actually talk about that just being the beginning. I mean, basically, things have been changing, technology has been changing, and you can do a lot more now that you couldn't do a few years ago. So we know, I talked about this before, 20 times more people need assistive technology than have it. So let's actually look at those numbers. I know how many people own ZoomText. I know how many people own JAWS, okay? I know how many people are using assistive technology out there, because we kind of have ballpark figures and we know what they are. And the reality is less than 5% of the people that could benefit from assistive technology actually own it. And so how do we break that cycle where very few use, but all this effort is being made on making websites compliant? There's a lot of great assistive technology out there. We make ZoomText, you've got WindowEyes, Dragon, Nuance, NVDA, JAWS, Freedom, but all of these are individual accommodations for one person at a time. They all require extensive training. You essentially need to be prescribed them by someone at Vote Recap so that you can afford this expensive software that costs $600 to $1,200. I heard the guy talking here before, talking about $100 per hour for an interpreter. The reality is $1,200 for a piece of software is just as cost prohibitive for someone with low vision as $100 an hour, because they're not going to get it. And in addition to them not getting that, they then need to go through a few days of training just to get to a basic standards of usage. Now, don't get me wrong. This is life-changing software for a lot of people. They couldn't go back to work. I mean, the thing that gets us all excited is all the letters on the walls in our office from the people that said, you've changed my life. We couldn't have gone back to work if it wasn't for your software. I mean, we get it, but we've learned from that. And we learned that there's a lot more people that could benefit if we could figure out a way to kind of turn the paradigm upside down and just give it to everyone for free. Now, I don't know if anyone heard about self-disclosure numbers. So how do you get to people and give them software, or even have them pay for software, when only 3% of the people in America will actually disclose to their employer that they have a problem, that they have a disability? For Section 503, the objective is to get to 7%. The numbers are actually 20%, or 1 in 5 individuals in America have a disability. But only 3% of the people are actually disclosing that they have a disability. So there's disconnect between the people that could benefit, the people that are actually raising their hands and saying, I want it. And so how do you get to the people that just need a little bit of help maybe, not like a screen reader, but other types of assistive technology? There was some market research done a few years ago by Forrester. In 2003, a study was commissioned by Microsoft, and one of their key findings was that 2/3 of working-age adults could benefit from assistive technology if it was freely available to them. So right around 2003, 2005, magically, the operating systems started building accessibility features into their operating system. Apple started building things, Microsoft started building some. So all these features, zoom, speech, make your mouse size, focus enhancement, change the size of your caret. Like, does anyone even know what a caret is here? Okay, a couple people, but do you think anyone knows how to go into the operating system and change their caret? I was at a library conference a couple months ago. There were like 300 people in the room, and I asked the question, how many of you, and I'll ask you, have ever gone into the operating system and changed an accessibility feature? How many hands? Okay, we're in the tech area, so that's a few. Now keep your hands raised. Okay, only keep your hands raised if you think your parents have gone in and actually made an accessibility feature change. Okay, 2 people. Okay, 3 people. Okay, actually that's better than the last time. But so the reality is these features were made and they were added, and they're great features. But just to have a feature doesn't mean it's usable. And so we commissioned a study again around built-in accessibility tools. Are people actually using them? Just because they're there, do people know that they exist, and are they actually using them? And we found that only 7% of the people that we surveyed actually said that they use it. Now remember, that's the same survey that said 19% of the people had disabilities, and 1/3 had challenges all the time, but only 7% actually used these features regularly. Now, but 2/3 of them were actually aware. So it wasn't that there wasn't awareness, they just weren't using it. So why weren't they using it? They weren't using it because they didn't know what to do. Okay, they needed someone's help to do it, or they just didn't think it was actually useful for them. So here's an actual infographic that you could share with people in your office that talks about 60% of people are aware but not using, and basically most of them just say this isn't the right tool for me. So there are components of built-in accessibility that are beneficial, but the reality is they're not usable. How many of you have ever used just the magnification on your computer? Okay, do you know that when you go to 3x, you're actually seeing 1/9 of the page? The average user of Zoom text actually is 6x, so they're seeing 1/48 of the page. 4x, so 4x you're seeing 1/16 of the web page. Okay, have you ever used a phone that wasn't mobile optimized and gone to a website and you had to use your fingers to go up and down and around to try to navigate? Well, that's what happens when you're at 4 or 5x. You're having to use the scroll bars to go back and forth, up and down, and guess what? It doesn't make your mouse bigger. Okay, so if you have your mouse and you're at 1/49 of the page, and your mouse is all the way over here, how do you even know where it is? How do you even find it? So there's a variety of things that just make built-in operating system, built-in accessibility features unusable, because they're not built by a company that focuses on assistive technology. They're just built on people that are good at building features and usability, but they don't actually understand the needs of the individuals that they're serving. So how can assistive technology reach its potential? Here's a list. If people do not self-disclose, if 1 in 5 people have a disability but only 3% disclose, that basically the AT community is focused on individual accommodation, less than 5% of those that could benefit from ATs use them, and compliance is the focus instead of usability. This list just keeps going on. So basically, with all the things I talked about, how do you get an assistive technology that can be helpful on a universal scale? So I think there's a need for a paradigm shift when it comes to assistive technology. So our belief at PsyQs and AI Squares is accessibility should be universal. Okay, it needs to support a wide range of abilities, not just a blind tool and a low vision tool and some tool for dyslexia and a tool for mobility. Because the reality of the situation, since people aren't self-disclosing and we're having to get to people one at a time and we're just not getting to them, how do we get things to people that more people could use? Okay, our goal with universal accessibility is to achieve a high level of end user adoption. Not 3%, not 5%, but 20, 30% of page views on a website. It needs to be easily deployed and easy to scale. So a corporation is not going to do it if it's hard. Okay? They will begrudgingly do compliance because the government is making them, but that doesn't mean that they're making it usable for people with disabilities. Now, I believe there is a way to build on compliance. Now that companies are doing compliance, there's an opportunity to show them that there's 100 million people that could benefit if you actually make your website usable, and we can utilize the compliance work that's being done because the assistive technologies that I'm going to be talking about build into the website take advantage of the compliance work. And it needs to be able to be supported by a broad coalition. So the accessibility and the disability community need to embrace it. Progressive corporations need to embrace it. It really is a group effort. It doesn't happen one corporation at a time. It happens because people understand that there's a big benefit. The other thing that organizations believe in is return on investment. Okay, you can hear all sorts of stories about, yes, there's a lot of people with disabilities and there's an ROI. Okay, and I've heard a lot of presentations about that. But the reality is if you're only serving the people that own assistive technology, you're not going to get an ROI. So the critical thing here is to increase the populations that's being served so the corporations can get behind it. And so what that means, though, is there's different decision makers in the corporation than there are when it was compliance. When it was compliance, decisions are being made by the accessibility folk. There might be one person in the organization responsible for that. If you're now talking about making changes to your website, okay, building features into a website, guess what? The level of who's going to make that decision goes through the roof. So now you got to get your VPs, your executive VPs, your CEOs involved in the decision-making process because it impacts their entire web presence. It impacts their brand, okay, because everybody that goes to the website has to have access to it. And so I actually think that this actually is the number one driver. If you can build an ROI into the accessibility equation, then you can get the corporations to actually stand up and take notice. So our new paradigm shift basically is websites need to be responsive to their individual customers. Okay, it needs to be universally designed, simple, intuitive, free to the end user, and basically seamless, just part of their website. It doesn't have any disability jargon. It just feels like it is a part of their website. It also needs to be delivered with new technology. It has to be a software as a service model that basically can be added simply and easily with a turnkey solution to the corporation that they don't have to actually redesign their website. So if it's now something that they can put in that improves their UX, okay, but doesn't take away from their designers designing their websites or their marketing vision from their corporation, maybe they'll consider it because they're putting the control of what the website is into the individual's hands. So basically, it's shifting the focus from usability rather than just purely compliance. And so what are these features that I'm talking about? From the learning that we've had from being in business since 1987 and focusing on the needs of people with disabilities, it's things like zoom, speech, color enhancements, mouse sizing, highlighting, and what we call the lens, which is essentially a reading box or a contextual zoom that can move around the website as the individual needs to, instead of them having to hop back and forth between zoom and reading. And so all these little things need to be tied together in an intuitive way that doesn't need training, because we're really talking about non-assistive technology users that would benefit from it. If you already have Zoom Text or if you already have JAWS, you don't need accessibility features built into the website. But we know that now there's 20 times more people that don't own those things. These are the people that we're targeting. We're targeting like the 1 to 4x crowd, not the 6x. I mean, Zoom Text goes up to like 87x. I mean, it's even higher. Can you imagine? You're literally talking about one letter on a page, and people will not give up that software because they can still have some visual acuity. They'll use a screen reader along with it, but they don't want to give up the ability to actually use the visual navigation of the website. So who are we helping? We're talking about having a solution that can help people, 9% of the population that has low vision, 15% of the population that has learning disabilities, dyslexia, ADD, ADHD. The interesting thing about individuals with dyslexia is that 2/3 of them don't even know they have it. So how do you help someone that doesn't know that they have a problem? You don't address the problem head on to them, you just give them choice. You give them functionality that they may or may not benefit from, and they'll use it over time. 21% of Americans have less than a 5th grade reading comprehension. Okay, how do you help them on websites? Okay, they have challenges. Those are people are marketing, people want them to work for the company too, is many of them can have things read to them, they understand it better than if they have to read to them. So why don't we just speech enable the website? And then you've got non-native speakers, and you make up about 5% of the population, and the majority of these individuals can actually, when they hear things read, they can understand it better just like people with low literacy. And then the thing that ties this whole thing together is 39% of the population that are seniors or boomers, okay, that all have diminishing, unfortunately, dexterity and acuity as they age. So how do we help them as they age without having to continually sell them something else? How do we just give them help? Okay, and so basically there's a variety of features that can help this whole constituency at one time without needing to solve all of their problems. Because the difference between a Zoom text or a screen reader is that they're involved with both the content creation and the content consumption. And when you're on the web, most of it is consumption. So let's design something for consumption. If they get access to some of these features and they realize they're out there, then they can get something more if they need something more. So basically, this is the use case for some of these features across the different types of disabilities. You can see that some benefit from many of them and some don't benefit from all of them. But the reality is even individuals with low vision, if you're low vision, you don't necessarily need all of those things. You may need 2 or 3 of those because one type of low vision is very different than another type of low vision. So I'll go back to the slide. How do you effectively recruit if this is what the individual sees? So there's a lot of companies out there like ourselves that are working on building access and usability right into websites. There's people that are focusing on speech enablement, on alternative views where you can strip out all the crap that's in the website and just have a clean view. There's people like Browse Aloud, AudioEyes, and ourselves, SiteQs, that basically builds in integrated features right into websites. So there's a lot of attention going here. It's not, it doesn't happen overnight. So I'm going to do a 2-second commercial before I go into recommendations. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we do. At SiteQs, we basically build Zoom and speech and color themes and reading enhancements into any website. Our whole focus is on corporations and organizations to build it in. It actually can be built in less than an hour. You're talking about putting 10 lines of HTML into the header or into the individual page or the entire website, and then you're basically giving these features to anyone that goes to the website. They don't know who SiteQs is because we're not all over it. It's basically part of the website. The colors are like the website. The sizes, the location is all chosen by the website. So it's seamlessly integrated so that anyone can use it as a customizable user experience. So I call it a customizable UX. So the individual goes, they use what they need, they make the site look exactly how they want it, and every time they go back, because we use local storage, it's the way that they wanted it. And so your designers don't have to get involved, your branding people don't need to get involved, the individual is in control, and they make the website the way they need it. And so basically, with one solution, you're addressing a lot of different needs. And another freebie, I'm going to give you a free version of SiteQs, which is a Chrome extension version. If you go here, you can use it on your own computer. It's $150 value. We use it in libraries to enable shared computers. It's not the same as SiteQs if it's built into the website, because if it's built into the website, it works in IE, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, and Edge. This is just a browser extension, but it does simulate the features that would be used in the website themselves. So happy to get feedback from any of you when you try it. Question?
Yeah, hey Mark, is that on the website, are you serving that as a tool? You said 10 lines of HTML code. Is that actually working? Is there a microphone? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. The 10 lines of go into the header. They're basically part of the content management. You want to repeat it? Okay, here's a mic. Hello. Okay.
Okay, the question was with regards to the feedback. The question was regarding to on the website. I presume that the code that you put in the HTML is probably invoking an applet to make the client-side experience whatever they want. Is that correct?
No, it's actually 10 lines of HTML. Think of it as a launcher. It literally is just, it looks, I'll show it to you. It looks like a feature to the website. It's not an applet. It's all HTML, okay? And there is ARIA built into it as well, so the screen reader actually could access it. Our chief architect actually was one of the original ARIA pioneers. His name's Aaron Leventhal. So everything that we've done is we've made this accessible, both in the code and in the user experience. So it's not an applet. It's just 10 lines of HTML. And so any website, by adding a single tool, can help a variety of visitors with a variety of abilities. They just put it right into the page, and that's pretty much it. No redesign. It's just value-added feature set, simple, clean. Okay, now the key is you got to make it usable. Okay, and it's really hard to get that expensive real estate. Okay, a lot of stuff that had been done previously, they would put a little logo down the bottom of the page, you'd launch it, then you'd go through a security protocol, and then you'd put a Chrome extension or something into your, nobody goes through that process. And so when we were designing this, it's like it has to be simple, intuitive, and easy to use. So here, that's basically what we're talking about. Can you run the quick little snippet here? Because I'm not going to do a demo. No. In the bottom left-hand corner, there you go. So basically, you mouse over it, it gets 16 times bigger. Because guess what? Someone with low vision can't use something that small. Okay? Everything that ARIA is built into it, so it would talk to them if they wanted to. Even the tips and tricks are animations, so you don't have to read it if you have cognitive issues. Settings, advanced settings like color contrasting and warmness and dark themes are automatically available to the individuals. And they can provide feedback to us. Average rating, feedback is about 4.5. And they can learn more about the product. Or the corporation can put their own message in here about their accessibility department. Usually it won't have our information here. This is just a demonstration. Or a nonprofit can get this funded by having a message from whoever the grant funder is for this service to them. So that's the real quick version of what SciQs is. But it's all about the metrics. So if people aren't using it, it really doesn't matter. But we found that when it gets instituted into a website, about 10% of the people that go to the website actually find it. About half of those people actually start using it. So around 5% of the people going to a website are using it. But what's really amazing is that they're doing 3 times the page views of the average user to that website. So these people are highly engaged. Okay, and they're amounting to upwards of 20% of the total page views from this small population of 5 to 7.5% of the people that are using it. And so what we're finding is that you're talking about building loyalty and building engagement with an underserved population. We were really shocked with these initial numbers. I mean, and the great thing is they build over time. So when people say that people wouldn't use it, the reality is they will. It's about the way that it's designed. It has to have a focus on universal accessibility. Okay, so let's go back to making the job application process more accessible. So Corporate Counsel Magazine, excellent publication. It's a lawyer's publication. Okay, they follow things like 5-way compliance, 503 compliance, WCAG 2.0, all this stuff. Okay, and their recommendation is how do you mitigate risk? Okay, how do you make it so that you don't get sued if you're not before you're ready to do a full compliance effort? So basically they said implement features in websites that enhance accessibility to a person with disabilities. consider putting in font sizing, text and background contrast, compatible in screen reading, alternative text images. I didn't write this, okay? This is an article from a lawyer firm saying you can mitigate risk of being sued by adding accessible features to your website. Yes, you got to do compliance too, but you got to show you're less likely to get sued if you show that you're actually trying to help. Now, the other thing that they said, consider building accessibility into the process early on. I mean, I know you've all heard that before, but what if instead of building it into the process early on, in the RFP, you tell your Taleo, you tell your ATS company, you're going to build these features in or you're not going to get the business. You just make accessibility and usability part of the process that they have to do to get the business. Because any web content, and all those companies that I showed you, any website, any digital content, you can build it right into it. So when they say that it's hard and they can't, they're just telling you that because they don't want to do it. Okay, we work with application processing company, but we're working with a lot of, we work with a lot of different industries, so I'm jumping from HR to now libraries. ILSs, so the library catalogs, so third-party content, just like an application processes third-party content. They all have a unique identifier for the corporation that they're selling, that they're serving up the information for. As long as there's a unique identifier, that means you can build features like this right into that content without impacting their other customers. So there's an opportunity here for progressive companies to be first, to build loyalty, to show that they care by helping more individuals with disabilities. Obviously, the lawyers also say hire legal counsel, confer with outside counsel, the normal things that you would say, but the number one and the number two things were essentially make accessibility part of your process. Pete did another study. Why aren't more organizations doing accessibility initiatives? Okay? Or why aren't those initiatives actually working? Why is 503, with all this effort around compliance, why isn't it actually moving the needle so that you get more people in the organizations to be hired with disabilities and more people that actually come forward and say that they have a disability? Because the numbers aren't moving yet. Issue comes down to awareness. Most of compliance is done behind the scenes. It's done by the legal people. It's not done by the accessibility people. It's not done by the whole organization. It's very little outward-facing initiatives. And so things like site cues and Read Speaker and some of these other things that are on every web page, of course people are bound to see them. So it needs to be more outward-facing. The other thing that they said, which is one of the things that I was talking about, is compliance versus usability mindset. Okay, we need to move beyond compliance and start thinking about usability. The Europeans think we're crazy. Okay, if you go to Europe and talk about accessibility with the Europeans, it's all about usability. Okay, they think section 503 and WCAG standards are important, but that's not what they're getting corporations to do. There's an organization that's gone around to major corporations and made them the CEOs sign these accessibility and usability pacts. Okay, not compliant packs, because a compliance pact isn't going to get you more users. Also, the complexity. Okay, they need simple solutions. We look at this as a first step. This is not the answer. You still need to make your website compliant. But if you can get your organization to do little things like a site cues or a Read Speaker, okay, you can then build on it from there. And so there are other little things that can be done. You don't have to follow the full WCAG guidelines to actually have best practices. You can follow some basic inclusive design practice. I mean, a lot of it is just logic. Like, look at the font and the thickness. Is your corporation really going to care if you do the one on the left or one on the right? But the one on the right is so much better for individuals with disabilities. So basically, best practice of inclusion design are critical to making change. The other thing, if you're now going to start talking about usability versus accessibility, what you're measuring has to change. So now you're actually talking about measuring business practices instead of alternative text and H1 to H6 headers. Now you're talking about how quickly was someone able to complete a task. Okay, was someone with a disability able to complete it in a reasonable amount of time? You start measuring performance. You start measuring errors that they they are making, instead of just having someone come in to do a usability test on your website to make sure all the buttons click and the buttons speak to you. Instead, you start measuring the actual usage and can they actually do something on your website. And so basically, how do you make the accessible online hiring more process better? Basically, you start measuring how many prospects you're actually hiring. Okay, you start measuring, what were the challenges to the people that you did hire in your application process, and the ones that you didn't hire, why didn't you, what was wrong with us? Like, why didn't you use us? So the normal things that you do for an exit interview, you need to do them at a beginning interview so you can evaluate your own process and make them better. I mean, so basically, it comes with now, instead of focusing on compliance, you're doing a self-assessment of yourself based on the normal business practices that you would apply to everybody else. You're applying those normal business practices to individuals with disabilities. So I like to say usability and accessibility are an HR project. They're not an IT project. It's not, you can't just say, I can't do it because the IT department won't let me. Okay, if you approach them with the right project and the right reasoning, it's a business decision. And basically, HR needs to drive this business decision and not let IT say no. Okay, basically, you're trying to get to all of, all we're talking about now is the recruiting process. But the reality is the recruiting process is just step one. You need to go to the onboarding, the on-the-job training, the career development. All of that needs to be accessible to these individuals. If you're getting more individuals with disabilities into your organization, that means that you have to shift your priorities for every business practice. And so HR can't say that it's an IT project. The reality is it's a business decision and it's an HR decision. And you can start, I think the place to start, and this place a lot of organizations are starting, is with the recruiting process, making the job posting more accessible by building in functionality so that people can use it, then forcing their job application tools to have that as well. That's not happening yet, okay, but it's totally possible. We're looking for partners to work with us to do that. But basically, our goal is to make a more inclusive workforce where every aspect of the food chain here, when it comes to HR, is accessible to everybody. Here are some of the resources that I had. They'll all be available online. You can also just put in the word SiteQues and SlideShare, and you can get any of these things as well. So my name is Marc Zablatsky. I'd love to talk with you afterwards if you're interested, and thank you for having me. Any